Awesome. What's up, my friends? Welcome in to another episode of Vision Pros Live. I've got Walt Postlewait in the house, and we're going to be talking about what most businesses get wrong about banks and capital. This is important for us as visionaries because if you don't know how to establish your relationships with banks and with capital, and you've got an unhealthy relationship with finances, it's going to bleed out into every corner of your brand. And it is so important that we have guidance regarding the financial opportunities. My friends, finances, it is a vehicle for being able to create more abundance for those that we serve. Walt, thank you so much for being here today. This is going to be fun.
Jackson, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So, access to capital, it's not just about numbers. It's about understanding how the system really works. And I'm not going to pretend to understand fully how that system works. I know certain tricks up for my sleeves from years of startups, from having a Y Combinator funded company. We received $10 million from Paul Buchheit, the inventor of Gmail, Matt Cuss, the search director of Google, at Restaurant Connect, where we bootstrapped for years and built a recurring monthly revenue, and then eventually raised funding with the Baylor Angel Network, or being involved in John Lee Dumas's Kickstarter launch of his Freedom Journal and him raising $500,000 within 3 weeks through Kickstarters. There's a lot of different funding opportunities that I've had the experience of being involved in, and I'm one of the rare entrepreneurs who's gotten to experience funding from almost every major type of funding source. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to rest on my laurels and allow my ego to block me from seeing what else is out there. Walt, from your perspective, and let's get a little bit of background from you as well, because I don't want to misdefine your background with finances. What is it about the systems that really work? Let's dive right into that.
Certainly, you touched upon its relationship. I preach a lot that small business owners really need to have a relationship with a banker of some sort, and we'll talk more about the different kinds of banks and unfortunately, relationship. That's an overused word these days, but a small business owner, an entrepreneur, you can't expect to know everything. And that's why I have found that the most successful entrepreneurs put the right people around them. And so, and we'll talk more about it here in this conversation, but putting somebody around you who understands capital, who understands the pressures you are experiencing as a small business owner, and is there to not just, lend you money, but to be a sounding board, to actually kind of walk with you on growth plans and have somebody to bounce ideas off. That really is key. And frankly, I've built a 30+ year banking career on that principle.
Mm. See this, I'm going to push back a little bit for those entrepreneurs who have startups or tech companies, SaaS
Hmm.
companies that are often outside of the wheelhouse of a banker. And because I need more guidance on it. So when I'm going into a bank, and maybe I do misunderstand the relationship building process with the bank and how the funding, how the capital is actually allocated. But I often found that when I go in, they don't understand the freemium business model at all. They have a major resistance to it. And they're like, well, wait, what's your degree? I'm like, I don't have a degree. I had a 0.37 GPA, at BYU, if you'd like to know. Um, and then, you're somebody who's got a digital company back before COVID, especially was like, what do you mean? You only meet people via Zoom and how do you have real relationships? It's like my relationships with people through Zoom are stronger than the relationships that they build in person. But that doesn't necessarily lead to a warm and fuzzy feeling. Right? There's some diplomacy that's probably lacking on my end for it. But how do we build relationships with banks? And is it for specific traditional businesses? What is, and they want a pro forma, which you can easily create with AI and pull the wool over their eyes with it. They want a business plan, which everybody puts in their desk the moment they create it. They want an executive summary, and that makes sense. But the rest of that stuff is stuff that businesses don't use and implement on a daily basis in their brands. And the banks know it. They know they're not going to use it. And so talk to us a little bit further about this. Let's dive into the weeds.
Sure. Yeah. No. 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 Great place to start. So, with the broadening digital age, and frankly, and we can talk a little bit more about AI assisted coding, because to me that's opening up this
Mm.
marketplace for people who have identified challenges, and they have ideas and solutions. And with this, vibe coding, and I've lived it, it's brought the cost of development down to a place where, average blokes like me can come up with solutions. So I think bankers are going to have to play a catch-up game when it comes to tech businesses. But traditionally, startup companies have been a challenge for traditional banks to lend to. And so I'm going to break this little piece up into two little segments. One is the relationship, and then we can kind of talk about that first capital conversation, debt capital for a young business. So when I say relationship, if you're a business, you should have a checking or a savings account somewhere, because the idea that you are in business, you're trying to make money through this business, through this passion, through this idea you have. So you have to deposit these funds somewhere. It's been interesting because especially post COVID, there are more and more kind of digital banks out there that
Yep.
can be your relationship. And I know tech companies are kind of drawn to this because they do kind of speak the same language. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm still, I guess, a little bit old school, and I like that face-to-face kind of relationship. So for this young company, even if it's just an idea, but you've registered your business, you have an EIN number, go open up a business account. It should be a free account. There's plenty of free business accounts out there, and I would start with a community bank. And so the way I look at the banking kind of spectrum is you've got your large, global national banks, super regional banks I'd put into that same category. Not a there's a place for all of these types of banks, but for a small business, this first segment I don't think is for you, and I don't recommend that. Where I really recommend is the community bank. These are the smaller types of community banks. They're in your community, hence community bank, and they're made up of a different group of lenders, of people. These are people who are actually in the community looking to benefit and grow their community. Both of these segments are going to most likely be public companies. You're bigger the bank, the more likely it's going to be a for-profit, obviously, public company. All public companies, by definition and just the way they're structured, have to make more money year after year after year. And so, that's not a community bank. They still may be public companies. They're still trying to build value, but they really are of the community. And so that's where I would start. And you open up a business account, checking or savings account, get to know the people in that office, get to know the branch manager, the people in your community who are making decisions. And that's where it starts. And I always, if you have your business and you don't have that relationship yet, that should be your priority for tomorrow. Because at some point you are going to need that resource. Where I think these digital banks fall down is they're much more deposit centric, and when it comes to the lending side, I think they default too much to a scripted program like the big banks. For capital, then this is the third category of what I would call a bank. And unfortunately, it's a too well kept a secret here. They're called Community Development Financial Institutions, CDFI for short. They look like a bank. They kind of smell like a bank, but they are not a depository. And that is a significant difference, because these other two, these national banks, global banks in one bucket, community banks in a second bucket, they're all regulated. So they have oversight from the feds who tell them what they can and can't do. They have examiners that come out, they look at what they're doing. And that's because they are taking other people's money and lending it out to unrelated folks. And so they have a fiduciary responsibility of taking care of your money, your depositors' money. So that's why they're regulated. CDFIs, it's their own money. that they're lending. And if you want, we can talk more about where their capital comes from. But they are independent. They can do things that banks can't do. And if you are a startup business, and let's just define that as a business that you're still within your first 2 years of operation and cash flow, CDFIs are where you would want to have that conversation for capital. If you're needing capital for new equipment to expand, to hire, CDFIs are probably going to be your best bet because that's what they're designed to do. They're there to have you as their client really for 3 to 5 years. And then the idea is your business has the track record where they can then hand you off to the traditional banking environment, hopefully to a community bank, because that's really where my passion lies, is with the community banks. But that's how I'd answer that. Relationship, community bank. If you're a young business or a digital business looking for capital, I would start with a CDFI.
Mm. Very good. This is definitely helpful direction. I will speak to the virtual banks and
Hmm.
the communal bank experiences a little bit. On the virtual bank side, my friends, I used to use RelayFi. And one of the things I loved about RelayFi was that I could have up to 20 plus 25 bank accounts, I think. And those 25 accounts allowed me to also create basically sub accounts for certain team members to have access to different types of funding.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could give a brand new team member, well, maybe not brand new, but somebody who's been with us for 6 to 12 weeks, and access to a very low budget. And if they ran with the budget, but I knew I couldn't trust them, right? But if they used that budget responsibly and they checked in, it empowered them to learn new things about how to act as a business owner on my behalf and how to use those funds for different projects that we had. So that was one of my favorite pieces about it, was being able to have all those different accounts where I could separate the money and not have to worry about having a fee for each account that I had. Um, the also, to your point, Walt, the general UX and UI, like the user experience, user
Mm-hmm.
interface of dealing with it was just so easy, and the service
Yeah.
was so good. Um, the challenge, though, was in December of this past year. I got a notice on Christmas Eve of all days, we're shutting your bank account down. And we're not going to tell you why. And we can't tell you why because of regulations. And so here I am, like, oh man, like I can't tell my team about this. I've got to fix this before payroll comes up. Like, and thanks for the Christmas card, RelayFi. Like, wow. And so I dove in with AI. I was like, what do I do about it? Like, you can hire an attorney, but it's just going to cause yourself more pain. Like, just move on, find the next one. But these banks
Yeah.
apparently clean sweep and wipe out digital marketing companies and companies that are in the digital space kind of routinely as part of their processes, because they have parent banks that
Mm-hmm.
they have to comply with and stuff. And so I have no idea why it happened, but it happened. And it was 3 years into my relationship with RelayFi, and so I 100% loved it. But I'm grateful for the 3 years that I had. And so I'll say that. And now I'm with Mercury Bank. Maybe the same thing happens in the future with Mercury. But so far, so good. Freaking love Mercury. Same exact type of experience. And then as far as the communal banks goes, one of the things that scared me was, so in San Antonio, Texas, there's this pyramid looking building, and they light it up with different colors and stuff. And it had a bank on it called the Spirit of Texas Bank. And I figured they owned the building and everything. And so one day I decided to go in there. I was like, I'm Texan. I'm going to work with the Spirit of Texas Bank. Plus, you're supposed to go local and small. And I go into this bank, and I mean, they have like a corner dungeon office out of the entire thing. And it's in the middle of the day. It says their office hours are open. Lights on. Nobody was inside, and like there's boxes everywhere. And this thing's been open for years. It's like, okay, yeah, no. This looks like a horrible restaurant. Where like I'm gonna get food poisoning, a bank poisoning in this case. And so that was a real disconnect. And sure enough, within a couple months, they shut down, and I was like, dang, had I gotten an account with this bank account or with this bank, what would have happened had they shut down, and I would have been in a bind. And so I don't mean to preach against the small local business side.
Right.
I also went into a Truist, and I built a little
Hmm.
relationship with a VP of Truist locally. And they wanted to connect me to certain things, but That's kind of where my experience went, Walt, where it was like, wait, they know small local businesses and they understand that and they feel comfortable with that. But with what I was doing, they didn't feel comfortable and they felt like I was building something that was kind of, I don't want to say crazy, but they tried and they meant well, but I could tell that I wasn't building a relationship that was leading towards them helping me. It
Hmm.
was, they wanted me to network locally and do certain things, but they really didn't want to touch the business model with a 10-foot pole. And there was something awkward about that. So perhaps there's changes in the times right now. We're going to come back. We're going to take a little break, my friends, but I want to dive in specifically about the financial landscape and how it is evolving right now. That was years ago. Now there's a rise of AI in banking. They're more they're more positioned to understand different business models if they understand how the AI stuff works. And I love that Walt used the words vibe coding. Walt, way to get with the times, man. You're a banker who gets mod. It gives me hope that wow, okay, maybe more of them are starting to pay attention. But we need to understand how those tools can also amplify our relationships with the banks who are starting to inform themselves. And if your bank is not, but you have a relationship, you also have the opportunity to plant the seed and help them see what you know. I could see how that could put you in a very good position with your banker in today's society. So we'll be right back and we'll dive right in. All right. Welcome in to Vision Pros Live with Jackson Calame. I'm your show host. We'll be doing interviews for visionary entrepreneurs and guest leaders who are building fantastic visions out there. Hey, what's up, everybody? Again, I'm super happy to have Walt here today talking about banks and capital because this is such an important reality. My friends, I used to say I don't care about the money because I got into business to help people, but I didn't realize that that doesn't have to be mutually inclusive, those two statements. I was basically telling my God, hey, if you send me money to help people, I'm not going to care about it. That's not a good recipe. That's not being a wise steward. I had an immaturity when it came to finances, and that was holding me back. When I switched to start looking at money and saying, you know what? I am grateful for the sacred resource that is right in front of me. I need to be a wise steward and learn how to work with this in order to serve more people. My life started to become more abundant immediately. And as I've continued to lean into that, I've continued to unlock superpowers when it comes to funding my vision, moving this podcast forward, moving my other businesses forward. And I wish the same thing for you as a visionary. It is super important that we lean into learning how do we access and utilize the funding that is necessary to bring our visions to life. So we've got Walt here to help us with that today. He has mentioned that there is an AI revolution taking place in banking as well. And I think all of us know it because it's in every sector of our lives and news. And so I want to talk about two of the greatest resources for me when it comes to AI and implementing AI in my business. AI Mavericks with Austin Armstrong and Scott Simpson. These are two guys that dive into the depths of AI and the advanced stuff, and they're talking about agents and building out these agents. And so I have a membership for their program every single month so that I can go in and learn what are they doing, what is the AI hack of the month that they're working on and bringing to fruition, so that I can bring those into my business world as well, and I can stay ahead of the AI curves. They're very good at staying again in touch with what the latest and greatest and new things are. They're great leaders. That's also a big factor as to why I joined forces with them on this, even though I have my own AI program. Right? It's like, wait, you're going to work with somebody who's ultimately your competitor, and be in their environment while building? Yes, of course. And I talked to them about it, and I was like, guys, I have my own as well. I want you to know, it's like two math professors. You know, they're teaching geometry. I'm teaching algebra for this, and we're all getting more out of it because when the rising tide lifts all ships that are well prepared. If you're not a well prepared ship, by the way, you're sinking when the tide rises. Get your ship in order, my friends. Then there's the AI marketplace. The AI marketplace is our world for AI. And this is positioned to help anybody who's been a little bit scared of AI or who doesn't know how to use it from the get-go. You already have the skills within you as a professional. And I want you to be able to see and recognize that. Professionals, you can use this free tool on the front end to define what your skills are by just checking boxes of what do you know how to do in the real world. It will translate for you what you should have on your resume and on your LinkedIn, and you can revamp both of those within 15 minutes. In addition, it guides you through how to interview for conversations so that you can position yourself as an AI executive for the future. I believe that most of you who are working seen, and average American companies have far more AI skills than you even realize. On the business side, we have a bottleneck audit, and the bottleneck audit helps you see what are some things that may be going on in your business right now that you can check the box for, and it will show you what type of system you can build with AI in order to surpass those bottlenecks. Right now, we're in the founding member stage. We're going to have 50 founding members at $50 a month or $500 for lifetime access, not 1 year access, lifetime. We'll be bumping up to $100 after that. The 50 founding cohort is a special signature level, if you will. And you'll notice underneath the button for it on the enrollment page, it says you can apply for a grant if you can't afford this. My friends, I don't want to leave anybody behind. If you want to explore it, just go to the grant program and see what that looks like. You can dive in and see the dashboard, see how we design our materials every single month. And if you want to upgrade, fantastic. But again, if you're not in a financial position to be able to afford this, just come and join us for free. We also have the AI Exchange on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Central. We would love to see you there. Lastly, we've got the water project. While we're here to serve each and every single one of you, we also don't want to forget the less fortunate people who don't even have the ability to lock into AI. We're talking about people in Africa who don't have access to clean drinking water. This project was something that I couldn't relate to because I've never been thirsty in my life, but I'm glad a team member insisted that I take a look. Once I did, I saw kids celebrating water like my kids celebrate Christmas Day, and I was like, we should definitely help out with this. And so we do give to this project every single month. I hope that if you're in a position to give, you certainly can choose a community where you want to give. I love that the water project transparently shows you the completion of the project. They actually update you on the one that you donate to, which is awesome. But if you don't have the finances to give back to this, my hope is you will at least share it with friends and family. Maybe you can talk about it over lunch with somebody and show somebody what they're up to. I think it's really cool and fun to learn about. And we've got 8 billion people to help in this world, my friends. So if there's another cause that's drawing your attention, just like this cause was drawing one of my team members' attentions, do us a favor. Drop it as a comment in the show. I will personally take a look at whatever that cause is, and I will do my best to either create and spread the word for it or to also contribute to it myself. And so without further ado, let's get back to helping all of you with your visions. Walt, thanks for being here on Vision Pros Life.
Absolutely. It's a good conversation.
Yes, sir. So diving right into that rise of AI and banking and how the rules are changing and many business owners are falling behind without even realizing it. Where do you want to start for that segment?
Well, AI is here to stay. I think we're all beginning to understand that. The thing to remember with bankers, generally speaking, is they're slow to respond. Generally speaking, and when you
Sure.
speak in generalities, you always get yourself in trouble. But bankers are risk managers, and part of being comfortable managing risk is understanding the risks associated with the technology, the product, the times, the macroeconomics. And so because of that, bankers tend not to be a leading edge on anything. They tend to learn and adapt. And so I think that's where we are today. I can tell you from a regulatory standpoint, there's a lot of discussion over the last 3 or 4 years, both here and in Europe, on how commercial banks need to implement AI to better manage risk. Most of that is going into the front end side of lending, which I've spoken before on some other podcasts that I don't think AI will replace your commercial lender. Personal debt, personal lending, that's already been replaced. That got replaced by algorithms years ago, long before AI. But with commercial lending, there's so much different nuances from business to business, even in the same industry, that and granted, I'm a banker, that's my fabric, so I may be that slow to change, but there's too much humanity that needs to go into assessing that business owner's acumen to be successful and to be at the table when the headwinds come. I have not dealt with any business that hasn't had some headwinds at some point. It's inevitable. It's life. Things happen. And so really Commercial lending is about understanding the acumen of the business owner and assessing their staying power. And I think there's just too much humanity for that piece.
Mm. Interesting. I maybe it's a different category why it's perhaps overlooked a little bit, but to validate what you said too, yes, bankers, when you're in a successful position, visionaries, you don't have to react to the markets. And so you are going to be slow because why would you risk everything that you have? They're not great gamblers. And that's a good thing. Imagine if our banks were constantly gambling with our money. I mean, we would be in a very, very difficult position, even further difficult position as an economy. But as far as the commercial
2007,
lending side
2008, all over again.
oh, right. Yes. And with the commercial lending side, so there's a couple of routes that I recommend having your eyes open for my friends. And again, I want to be careful with this. I'm not a financial advisor. You're making your own decisions in relation to this. I'm definitely not a banker. But to open your eyes to what is out there that you may not have seen, Stripe provides
Mhm.
lending to businesses. As you continue to build up a good relationship with Stripe by processing transactions, not having chargebacks, they open capital to you. PayPal also opens lending to individuals and QuickBooks as well. If you've used QuickBooks for 2 years or so, QuickBooks Capital becomes a resource that is open to you. So there are opportunities, but I want to dive in more aggressively on this is again why it's so helpful and so valuable to build relationships with people like Walt. Ultimately, the more choices that you have, the better position you'll likely be in to get the best bang for your buck in these opportunities. And not just the best bang for your buck, but also the relationships that are likely to have more depth and can help you in different ways. And so that's really what it's about. It's about making sure that we don't end up with one solution for water bottles on the planet. That's where corruption ultimately comes in. And so you want to put yourself in a position, if you want to read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss as well, this goes back to basic negotiations. The person who is in the strongest position is almost always going, or has the least to lose, is almost always going to win the negotiations.
Mhm.
And so if you put yourself in a position to where you have collateral, you have versatility, you have different relationship options, you have supply and demand in your favor when it comes to how am I going to raise funding, then the banks are going to be more likely to want to win your business because they don't want you to go with another bank if they see that you have all those strengths. They're like, well, what can we do to win this account over? So those are some other fundamentals behind the scenes on this. Are there other hidden rules, Walt, of getting business from funding that we haven't talked about that you'd like to highlight?
Um, yes, and I would say information because what was interesting was with those lenders that you listed, I think it was three or four.
Mhm.
All of those are service providers that have data, and the reason why they're able to then provide credit is because the guesswork has kind of been removed.
Yeah,
They know what your cash flow is. They see every time you get paid. So that it's data driven, right?
right.
So it does take some of the guesswork out. When it comes to dealing with a community bank or a CDFI, it really is about the communication tools. Understand that the person you're talking to, you want them to be your advocate. They're your champion at that bank or at that CDFI. You need to
Mm.
empower them to be able to then talk about you and your business to the larger group within their institution, their organization, and sell you to them. Because in lending, there's a lot of times where the person you're talking to may have signing authority. At one time, depending where what lender I was working for, I had signing authority, so I could approve things myself. Often, it does need to go up at least one layer, and so the person you're dealing with needs to be given the information so they're excited about your business, so they can then take that excitement to the next level. And so that's where it comes to, you know, keep your books, right? With all of the technology out there today, it's really inexcusable if you can't produce financial statements, a balance sheet, and a profit and loss, an income statement. on a regular basis, and have it be, good information, good data. That shows that you're paying attention to your business and you're managing your business. You also need to be able to talk about your business from not just a passion standpoint, because if you're a business owner and you don't have passion about what you're doing, get out now.
Yes.
Right? Because you have to have that passion. Things are cyclical. There's the old saying, even blind squirrels can find a nut from time to time. So, you may have an opportunity. You may not be really passionate about it, but you see, oh, I could make a buck or two. Get in, make your buck or two, and get out. Because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, life is short. If you're not passionate and those headwinds come, that's where I think people then can get really tripped up and make bad decisions that not just impact themselves but others. So you have to have passion, and so you need to be able to talk about the business outside of your passion. You need to talk about your competitors. What makes you special? How are you differentiated from your competition? Now, we talked about a little bit earlier about that, the humanity aspect, and you talking to your banker about why you're going to stay when those headwinds come. And you got to equip whoever you're dealing with those pieces, Jackson, to have that successful conversation about capital.
Absolutely. My friends, I want you to also dive in with AI and ask AI about promissory notes and how promissory notes, are they legal? And ask it, are there ways to set healthy boundaries with individuals to talk through how to set up promissory notes? My friends have been teaching this for years. And I want you to dive in and figure that out for yourself and see what's there, because I see so many people skipping that stage and going straight to banks, capital, or worse, going to credit cards. And not seeing what else is out there. And I'm not saying that you can't win by taking out a credit card and running your business on that. There's people who do it, but there are so many other options that we often overlook, and we don't educate ourselves, so we don't really know what our options are. So I'm going to leave that where it's at. We're going to continue on this thought process of passion a little bit, because you were going in two different directions, Walt, and both are super important. One, you talked about the people who don't have passion. Now I want to talk about the dangers of having passion. When we have the passion, there's a saying, when we start selling hammers, everything looks like a nail. And I see a lot of business owners think that their stuff's way cooler than it actually is, or think that they're way more prepared than they actually are. Guilty as charged. As a business owner, we have to be able to look past our blind spots. We have to have team members who can help us see that, wait, we need to get these elements in place before we launch. You can passionately run yourself way too close to the cliff or off the cliff if you're not careful with making sure that what you're doing is also pragmatic. And so that's another side. But as we get ready to, so now let's say that you're in the middle zone. You have the passion, but you're also pragmatic. You've got the story. You've got the data driven processes to help showcase that you're on the right track. My friends, one of the greatest challenges, and this is something that I think we have an opportunity to teach our banks about, is that we are often misguided 90% of the time, maybe plus, maybe even 99% of the time in some cases, on how much money you need for operations, marketing, and advertising. And I'm going to show an article that we created. Walt, I look forward to your opinion on this as well. I'm going to plant this seed, my friends, with the first banker I've talked to yet about this. But there's this there's this myth that exists, and it comes from the SBA. And we hear friends and family regurgitate this over and over, that you need to put 7 to 8% towards marketing and advertising. And Gartner backs it up and says the same thing. And the CMO survey that evaluates like 6,000, I think, CMOs says it's around 9.4%, around the same exact reality. And here's the odd thing about this. The 6,000 CMOs they asked, there's no proof that any of them are any good at what they do. And in fact, there's a track record of 66% of businesses losing within 10 years. So if you follow the advice that all of these entities are pushing, you are likely to have the exact same track record that every other company that they've ever revised has also followed. But I took this article, and I worked with Claude on this, by the way, and it's talking, and it talks about how that is a descriptive reality, the 7 to 9%. It is not a prescriptive reality. And the actual behavior is closer to 1%. I mean, they did studies, and the average American business owner only spends 1.08% of revenue on advertising. But that led me to ask, well, wait a second. Do we know, out of the brands that actually listen to SBA, how many actually have winning track records that spent 7 to 8%? There is literally no study done in the world that exists on this. And whether this is actually an accurate map, or whether the map is just some fable that was invented by authorities and institutions and has just been pushed over and over and over. So we're going to go down here to looking past Tesla, past other frameworks, to this reality. And this is based on VC backed information. If you're pre revenue or you have no budget, you don't get to invest a percentage. And if you invest the bare minimum in your industry, you're like, it's like a gardener saying, what's the least amount of water I can give my plants and them not die? That's not how you build a healthy garden. You need to put yourself in a position where you have the capital to advance your projects. Let's go down to new businesses, 0 to 2 years. VCs recommend that you put 20 to 50% of revenue towards your brands. Hey, if you're Dropbox put 100% of revenue towards their advertising and their marketing. They made it to a $10 billion IPO. What about existing but stalled businesses? Well, if you've stalled out because you have a bad reputation, because you didn't hit it off in the beginning, guess what? People are going to be that much less likely to be excited about finding out your brand. You've got to invest more in those cases. And there's industry stats on, if you're going to do a rebrand, $100,000 to $350,000. I know that's not comfortable, but business isn't about being comfortable. It's about providing for your loved ones. It's about making sure you put yourself in a position where you are as bulletproof as possible. Established and growing, then maybe you go down to 10 to 20% and you work on maintaining. And in the dominant cycles, most brands that are dominant in their market, they are pedal to the metal, crushing it. But if you want to gamble and put yourself in a position to where you are maintaining status quo, 7 to 15% might be possible, but recently Tesla learned that other companies come after you and they take your lunch money. That's what's happening with DYB over in China. And that's why Tesla is now advertising, even though they had a no advertising policy previously. But that was with a founder who had 150 million social media followers. He had $1 billion strategy in place that didn't cost him anything because he had already built equity into that for so long. So while those are some of my thoughts and some of the studies, I'll drop the link for everybody, is that we've got to help entrepreneurs realize that they need to invest far more in their awareness campaigns, in their branding, in their exposure. I don't see anybody in the market talking about this because there's no study to challenge the authorities. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're spot on. I've worked with a lot of companies that have developed great mousetraps, but if you can't tell the word about your mousetrap, you're not going to sell any. It's one thing to come up with an idea and a product. It's a whole different thing to actually turn that into money because you have to sell it. And no, I agree with you, Jackson. I think when it comes to the soft side of working capital and where that gets spent, all too often entrepreneurs, visionaries get concerned and they hold on to cash a little bit too tight, right? And it's a defensive move. I think it's kind of part of our nature.
Sure.
When it comes to, is it 7%, is it 8%, is it 9%? I would kind of throw all of those out. I agree with you. I think it's more than that. What happens a lot in finance is you get people, often it starts at universities and goes out from there, and they come
Yep.
up with these formulas and they pontificate from above. These are ratios you should have, and nobody's following up, right? Nobody's looking
Right.
at the 25 most successful companies in industry A, right? What are they spending? The part of
Exactly.
the underwriting that banks do, there's some data collectors out there. RMA, they were purchased by, I think ProSite might be the name, but they basically aggregate all of this CPA tax return data. So as a lender, I can subscribe to this service. If I'm dealing with a SaaS company, and I can then look at, all right, other companies within these size ranges, this is how much they're spending, but that's not out there for everybody to look at. and it can vary by industry. But yeah, I kind of ignore a lot of these reports. SBA is good. What I would say is
Yes.
SBDCs, the Small Business Development Centers that are in every state. They're county kind of based. They can be extremely useful, but reports that come from SBA, I give them maybe a C or a C plus when it comes
Well,
to.
it's again, it's not the report itself. That
Yeah,
report is accurate, but they've never measured
yeah,
the reality of the outcomes. And so it's important data, but it's an incomplete data set. It would be like me telling you guys, hey, if you want to get to from Houston to San Antonio, then 1,000 people have tried to do it and or are on their way. And as far as we know, they all needed 3 gallons gas. And then nobody's checking if the 1,000 people actually made it or not. They're just telling them that as a general answer. And obviously the data connects a little bit better. And I break it down in the article for you guys to see why do they recommend what they recommend and what's there. But if you don't measure against the outcome, there's no accountability for the advice given. And like I said, it's about businesses that are maintaining, that are already successful. That's where that knowledge is coming from. It's not from your variable where your stage is and where you're at as a business owner. And so we have to be more careful with that reality for ourselves. And as far as the SBDCs go, the local, I have another article on that. They do have free, legally required to help you advice. And the almost nobody uses it very well. And so I've wrote an article about what to watch out for in relation to working with the SBDCs and how it's extremely beneficial. We wouldn't have raised the $100,000 of the Baylor Angel Network if it wasn't for our guide at Georgetown University, who was helping us on that during our days with where I was full-time Restaurant Connect. So by all means, guys, lean into these types of resources. Walt, we don't have too much time left. I'm going to throw 3 different topics at you at once,
all right.
and we'll do our best to efficiently go through them. One is why access to capital is about to change with the AI and the banking explained on that side. But more importantly, how is it changing? And how different types of banks serve different types of businesses as well.
Mm.
Maybe we'll dive into that a little bit. We can also create materials after the fact, Walt, if we want to give it back to the audience in a different way, and how banks really decide who gets capital.
Let's start with 2, go to 3, go back to 1. So you told about your experience with the bank and the pyramid. I can't remember the name of that bank. When selecting banks, it's an interview process. Not all banks, not all community banks are a fit for every business. Just like, if you're getting a CPA or if you're getting an attorney, you want to talk to them. You need to make sure that there's a fit. And often people just go, oh, this is the bank that's closest, or oh, I like this is the better advertisement, or this is the best one with their online mobile banking. You got to talk to the people and do your research. All banks, because they're regulated, you can look up information on them at FDIC on that. Third, how to get the capital or what that looks like, the decision-making process. It goes back to what we were talking about with having that champion within that organization. And really what they are doing, especially for young companies or companies that don't fit in a box. Well, if you fit in a box, skip Passco, go to a community bank, and get dialed in after you have that relationship. If you're a young business, if you're in these industries that are kind of new and unknown, it's the CDFIs, it's the community banks, but it boils down to debt is not a grant. The lender needs to have a reasonable expectation that you're going to pay them back. So that's your job, is to outline how, with taking this money from them, putting it into your business, you're going to generate more money, which then can be used to pay them back. It sounds simple. It's more complicated than that. But if
Sure.
you put that as your guidepost, you need to convince them that you can pay them back. That's 50% of the path. That gets you this huge head start. When it comes to AI, I think AI is going to play a couple roles with banks. both community banks and we can say the big banks as well. Fraud detection, let's face it, you know, I often kind of muse that these people who prey upon others and pull off fraud, if they would just put that much energy and resources and intellect into doing good in this world, how
Mm,
much better would this world be? But
right.
fraud exists. AI is excellent at pattern recognition. So we already know and we've seen AI used in fraud detection. Other areas with banks is new services and better interfaces. You know, what we had for mobile banking 5 years ago is completely different than what we have today. I think it's going to continue to develop. AI is really bringing down the cost of creating these platforms and these programs, and banks will capitalize on it. And then lastly, and I disagree with a lot of people out there, you know, the talking heads talking about AI replacing people in the banking world. I do not, and I already touched on it, but I don't see AI taking over credit decisioning on the commercial side. I think it will augment it. I'm hoping it makes it faster because I'll tell you,
Right.
in the worst thing a banker can do is deliver a slow no. If you're dealing with the
Mhm.
lender and they're dragging their feet, and every 3 or 4 days they come back to you and they need one more piece of paper, and this goes on for a week, cut and run. Slow bankers have given themselves bad reputations because of bad practices. And the slow no is to me, you know, inexcusable. So I think AI is helping on the workflow, making the process easier for businesses to go, but I don't see it necessarily replacing the decision making process. And then the selfish plug, I think AI can reduce the risk involved with commercial lending. That's what we built our company on. And the goal and the reason why we built this, and I mentioned this before, bankers tend to be, well, not tend to, they are risk managers. But to
Mhm.
manage risk, you have to understand the parameters that you're working in. And we all know the world's very crazy right now. So if we can develop an AI tool that does a better job of and a lower impact on the borrower to collect financial statements so we have the data so we can have early warning systems, it ultimately reduces the risk to the commercial lender. And if the risk goes down, I believe they will say yes to more loans or more questionable loans, increasing access to capital for these, you know, less known industries or younger businesses because they have that data feedback loop that is so essential.
Absolutely. Guys, today we received a masterclass on all things banking and AI, and we can combine those two for our advantage. I want to be able to help you do just that. If you have a vision and a brand that you are trying to build, you can take the script from this exact video and you can plug it into AI. And I want you to do it because, one, I don't like to have conversations where I'm caught with my pants down. Meaning, I don't like to go to a lender or to a lawyer or to anybody who's got a whole lot of knowledge over me on a subject and I'm not prepared to talk about it. I don't really understand them. I'm kind of wasting their time now. I haven't done my due diligence. Well, now AI can help you understand those things so much better so you can go in with the right types of questions. So give AI the script, tell it to do research on you and your situation. Ask it, what questions should I be asking when I go into these environments? What results might I be looking for? It's not going to give you a perfect answer, but I guarantee you it's going to give you more knowledge than you have right now if you just try to go in and do it by yourself. It can, as Walt talked about, augment that reality. For those of us looking to use AI to replace assets or people in our life, you're going to suffer the consequences of that, period. That's the wrong attitude. It's how can you amplify your life and your situations? And look no further than Ring Central's piss poor customer service. Look no further than Bank of America, and how bad their customer service has become. They've spent millions of dollars implementing AI the wrong way. So yes, there are companies that are going to regret the way that they move towards AI. The neat thing about that is I think a lot of them will realize the cost and they will course correct and be looking for people to come in and help salvage those relationships and build those businesses out too. So there's going to be some disruption that takes place. But my hope for you as a visionary, learn to use AI the right way, learn to use capital the right way, build the relationships and understand how to use it in a way that is ethical, in a way that is healthy, in a way that creates sustainability for what you're up to. Walt, I really appreciate all that you've done. My friends, I'm going to be asking Walt if he will meet with me after this because I would like to be able to unpack more for him. It is really that simple in life, my friends. Just reach out to people like Walt. Doesn't matter if it's through LinkedIn or if it's through Facebook, wherever you find him, just go to Google or AI and ask for Walt's information. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you about how your visions can be impacted or can benefit from the services that he may have. Walt, I'll give you the final word. Cookie cutter, or not cookie cutter, sorry, fortune cookie style. What advice or final wisdom do you have for visionaries out there?
Build relationships, put the right people around you, and then listen to them. Unfortunately, through my career, I have had businesses, I've had friends grow businesses, not listen to advice from me or others, and then find themselves growing out of business. And that's a real threat out there. So put the right people around you, but then listen to them.
You heard it from Walt Postlewait on Vision Pros Live. Let's build relationships. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a